So, welcome to the Curation Corner. I'm Shadows Pub here with my co-host Artemis North, and our guest today is Improv from Steam Fiction and Free White House. We'll be getting to know him and talking about what they are doing on and for the platform. So, welcome, Improv.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. It's nice to meet both of you. I've seen you around the blockchain, but I don't think we've interacted all that much. So it's a pleasure to meet you both.
Yeah, I saw you being interviewed. I believe it was on Pensive Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the following
Yeah.
the following Friday you were on with
With
Ingenuity.
Ingenuity. That's
Yeah.
right.
So, how long have you been on the blockchain?
I recently celebrated my second year anniversary, Steemit board told me. So I've been on for just over 2 years now.
So you came on in May of 2017.
Early June of 2017, yeah.
Early June.
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, I know what I was doing in early June of 2017. It wasn't pleasant.
Oh, no. Do you want to elaborate? Because that's like a teaser that you can't let go by.
Oh, I was had been rather ill in May, and in June I ended up in hospital, and that
Oh,
started a whole new saga out that eventually ended up with me giving up a kidney last September.
oh my goodness.
So,
Well,
you just reminded me of the anniversary, that's all.
yeah, I'm glad you moved through that. Yeah, it was in fact shortly after I started on Steam that I had pneumonia and had to go in the hospital and get surgery to remove. Anyways, so
Wow. So when you come
yeah,
on,
medical problems are a thing. Yeah, go on. Sorry, what?
as I recall, right around that same time, Steam took a jump to about 250 each,
Yeah.
just momentarily, and it dropped
Uh-huh.
back. I do recall that. It was great
Yes.
because it gave me enough money to be able to buy my tablet that's sitting here beside me.
Oh, that's nice. Right around that time, I had a few followers that were interested in supporting me, and I saw my account, which only had a couple hundred Steam in it, jump to be worth $6,000, and I thought, wow. So I've made like $1,000 over the course of a couple of months working on Steam. This is amazing. This can be a full-time job. I'm not going to take any out right now. I'm just going to leave it there so that it can compound interest. And of course, then what happened. And now I'm like, oh, I wish I had taken it out and then bought it back when it dropped. But that's
Yeah,
okay. I'm
yeah,
committed.
you could do it that way, or just leave it there and enjoy when it hit the $8 mark.
Sure, I never took it out. I have never powered down. Someday when I have enough to buy a house.
When I come on board Steam, it was in that initial excitement of it first being released, and it was up at one point around $3 or $4, and then over the course of the next several months, prior to June of 2017, it dropped as low as 7 cents, and there were times I was looking at it and going, should I be jumping out or buying in? And I just kept plugging away, posting and making whatever I made, and I've been quite happy at the fact that it's now at least a consistent 30 some odd cents.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. It gave me the confidence to buy in a little bit ago, and just to think of this as, something that I haven't spent so much money on that if it becomes nothing, I'm afraid and scared, but that someday maybe this becomes.
Sort of along the lines that if it becomes nothing, it's been an amazing experience. That was a question. Did we lose you? Improv.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Sounds like he's got a connection issue. We need you back. He's probably going to drop out. And we're going to have a little pause in here. So you were doing some checking around about him, weren't you?
I was just going to say, I just dropped a link to his blog, and there's a fun clip on there if anybody wants to look at that while we're waiting.
What's the clip about?
It looks like a bunch of takes from different scenes. They're just funny little skits, I guess.
Engine dropped out, not improv.
I'm here.
There we go. Are you
Hey,
back?
hi,
Oh,
I'm
Ives
Kitty
here.
Girl.
It's improv we're looking for. Just in case he thinks he's lost us. Yeah, it looks as though, yep, there he goes. Hopefully that's his connection's going to renew and he'll be right back.
Here's another interesting blog that he's part of, and talks about his adventures of a newly free wanderer busking in LA.
Oh, so he's had varied activities, so we're going to have to hopefully get him back here.
Yeah, he even has a page on IMDb. He's got lots of interest by the look.
Well, in the interim, I hope he's back in 1 hour, 1 minute and 33 seconds because I'm playing the video on our feed. Hopefully that'll make like a commercial.
Oh, good. Here's hoping.
I've never actually played a video on a feed on OBS.
There you go, Engine. That's a cool idea.
I can relate to his frustration about right now.
Sorry, you cut out shadows. About what?
I said I can relate to his frustration about right now.
Yeah, I hear you.
So what would we make the commercials about, Engine? You can come on voice if you like. Other shows, new dabs. Interesting thought. That might be an.
Oh, it'd be perfect because I know, at least for me, when I'm doing my shows, I drop off a lot sometimes because of connection problems, and it appears Improv is having one at the moment too. So, or even like when you get shows that are back to back, do a little drop in between them when you switch over and start a new stream.
Yeah, that's an interesting possibility, actually. Might be worth giving a try too.
I wonder if it's Discord. My connection keeps cutting in and out a bit.
Mine, I know, is the internet. It'll probably drop here again in about 5 minutes. Every day, same time.
My connection's been pretty steady since Sunday. Sunday I was down for about, I think, 3 hours. That was a Google thing.
Must have felt like your hands were cut off.
Well, more than my hands. Uh, I was reading an article on it this morning, and apparently Google was going to do some maintenance on a few nodes, and there's a miscommunication somewhere internally. And they brought down a whole mess of their nodes, which brought down a lot of their network.
Ah,
What's that?
I said, that's crap. How did a corporation that big and supposedly run by intelligent people make that big of a boo boo?
Ah,
World
I'm
news, I
back.
guess.
I'm here.
And
I'm
he's
here. I'm
back.
so sorry, everybody. Oh,
Well,
my goodness. My internet crashed. What happened while I was gone? Did you solve the world's problems?
actually,
Oh,
Artemis has been, like I told you, Artemis had been doing a little checking around on you, and she had found one of your blogs with a video on it. So we played the video while you were gone,
Great. Well, what did I do?
and then we had a conversation about the value of having some commercials for times that we drop off.
Oh, good.
See, it's one of the things you'll learn on the shows on the Ramble. Anything's liable to be discussed.
Well, I'm excited. Oh, look, you found my IMDb, which I'm proud of. You also found my Blogspot blog, which I haven't updated since joining Steam, maybe.
Artemis is
Yep.
really good. She also found that you joined Medium as well.
Did I? I don't. That's not a thing that I've ever been active on. What did I do on Medium?
Nothing. We noticed that too. We noticed that your account is there, and it looks as though you did a few claps. But other than that,
That's probably what I did.
yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah. So we were talking about you arriving in Los Angeles, was it? I've lost track.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did. I am in Los Angeles, and I at some point arrived in Los Angeles.
And what did you arrive there for?
I'm an actor, and so before, I mean, you know this since you researched me, but I moved from Seattle in 2000. Well, I left Seattle in 2009 in order to travel around the world, and kind of my wife and I trying to figure out. All right, let me take a step back. I went to college in Seattle and studied theater, and got a job fairly soon thereafter working in theater, but not as an actor. And I realized after being an adult for several years that I was never going to pursue a career in acting as long as I felt semi-fulfilled by my career in the theater that was not acting. And so I decided that I needed to kind of cut ties with the things that made it easy for me to be content. And so we left Seattle, which we loved very much, in order to travel around the country and the world with a busking routine, performing on the street, juggling, telling stories, walking on stilts, to try to figure out where it was that we wanted to move so that I could pursue a career as an actor. And my wife is a writer, and so her job is mobile. So we traveled around the country in 2009 by hitchhiking, and wound up in New Orleans, which is a huge busking city. There's the best buskers in the world are there. And we realized very shortly after getting there that these buskers, these professional buskers, not only had great talents to share with everybody, but the key to being a successful busker was having a good hat line, was making the audience want to give you money. And after talking about that for several months, kind of agonizing over the decision, we realized that that was not even remotely what we wanted to do. We did not want to work on being good at asking people to give us money. And we respect the people that know how to do that and that have spent a lot of time and energy figuring out how to do that, but that was not what we wanted to do. That was still not acting and performing. So we hung up our juggling balls and our stilts, and we continued with our travels, just living off of our savings, trying to get around the country and figure out where would be a good place for me to pursue an acting career. We stopped by Los Angeles, we went to New York City, and then we flew from New York City and other places, of course, Chicago as well, and flew from New York City to Europe, where we thought we would have been busking and traveling some more, but had decided not to do that, and then had travel fatigue and decided to settle down and just teach English in Germany while we were there. And while we were teaching English in Germany, my wife, at Stina Wog, who is also on the blockchain, wrote her first novel and we talked a lot about the various places where we thought I could build an acting career. And yeah,
What
you
did
want
you
to say
say?
something? I heard.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch your wife's screen name.
I will post a link.
Good plan.
Steamit.com/@steamlog.
Oh, I don't think I've ever come across her.
Yeah, she doesn't post as frequently as I do. She is a busy person, but she does. She did a free write just the other day, and she's been posting semi-consistently for years as well.
So, what topics does she write on?
Mostly she does free writes, just like I do. She also is a member of Steam Fiction. So if we're talking about Steam Fiction, she is also one of the writers of short stories through the Steam Fiction publishing house, or whatever we are. This group of people who has decided to make their brand Steam Fiction and write short stories that get collated and published on Amazon.com. Or a little inside baseball, we might be considering other platforms to publish on right now.
That's probably a good idea. So I recently participated in what the person called a community book project.
Oh,
so that would be kind of like what you're doing in the Steam Fiction.
Yeah, what is this? Tell me more about what you're involved in.
Oh, it was a woman by the name of Donna Kozak, and she does these community book projects. Basically, the parameters of it is she chooses a topic, and you write 200 words on the topic. It's 200-word essay, and you put a quote along with it, and you submit it. And if she's happy with it, then it goes into the project, and it goes up on Amazon. And then, of course, you can claim that as a publication credit.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
That gave me my author's page on Amazon.
Right.
She's got another one running right now that's it's on the word independence.
Cool.
I haven't jumped into that one mainly because I'm kind of busy at some other stuff and don't want to spread myself too thin. But that came to mind when I was looking at Steam Fiction. You're doing a very similar thing there. It's like a community project.
It is. Ed Giesel deserves all the credit for putting us together. He reached out to authors on the blockchain that he thought and took suggestions of other authors on the blockchain from people that he respects. And he's been doing the hard work of publishing, and we're working on figuring out how to alleviate some of the difficulty of that task. Because the actual publishing of the book is a tremendous endeavor.
It is.
So we are a group of that, for the most part, is nine core members, and then other people jump in for a single book, or sometimes people have to take a short break. But 9 or 10 people each write a short story, though these short stories are longer short stories. They're 5,000 words each, and some Felt Buzz, I'm sure you know Felt Buzz,
Yep.
Keeps writing 20,000 word stories, which is great. But he's prolific. We collate them. They're all organized on a theme, just like yours are, but they're all fictional short stories.
So, how do you handle the editing on those?
That's a wonderful question, and probably an integral part of what the community has become. Giesel has a friend, Gabrielle, who is our kind of central editor and proofreader. So the first step is we all submit our first drafts, which are sometimes works in progress, as even us as we submit them know that we're still figuring out how everything fits together. But once we have a first draft, we put it up in our Discord server, and we each read each other's short stories, with the caveat that people are like, "Oh, this is. I know that I need this part fixed, and I need to fix this part." We don't give them notes on that, but we do go through with, just noting any obvious proofreading that needs to be done, and helping each other mold the stories, so that if there's anything that doesn't make sense, or that feels off, or that just doesn't flow well, people can be aware of those problems and they can fix them. And then over the course of a couple of days to a couple of weeks, we come to what we feel like is an editable draft. And then Gabriella, or Gabrielle, I only have read her name, so I'm not entirely certain how to pronounce it, goes through all of the stories with a fine-tooth comb. And she has a master's and is a professional editor. And she goes through each of the stories, noting obviously proofreading errors, but also things that don't feel right. And then after that, we take her notes and we incorporate them into a final story. So every author has complete control over what will get published under their name, but is open to criticism. And, I think we make some at least readable stories, and some people seem to even enjoy them.
Well, with there being a professional editor, you're probably getting more polish than a lot of us are. Peer critiquing is an interesting project. I saw it underway over there in Steamhouse for quite a while. Steamhouse is rather quiet at the moment because the leadership is off promoting a book.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But one thing I have noticed when you have a peer critiquing group is that some people are very active and very good, and other people tend to sit in the background and do nada. Do you run into that?
Sure. I mean, everybody, we acknowledge that people have busy lives, and the people that are critiquing, that just means that their voice is in the book a little bit more. There's 10 writers, and so I acknowledge that I don't read everybody's story during that period because I just don't have the time. But I always manage to read at least 3, and this past round I managed to read 6 of the stories. So as long as everybody does that, everybody's got a couple half dozen voices reading their stuff. And Feltbuzz, I believe, manages to read all of them. I think Gisela manages to read all of them. So there are at least several voices that can point out major errors in each of them.
So does the 20,000 word one end up in the book, or does he trim it a little bit?
It does. It does. I think it came down to about 16,000 words ultimately. But yeah, our short stories vary. I think the shortest one is just over 5,000 words, and his is the longest. It makes for a not quite 300-page book, which seems like a reasonable length for a collation of short stories to be.
Yeah, that's not too bad. 20,000 words is generally considered to be like novella length, and
Exactly.
the 5,000 is a pretty good base for a short story. They can go a little bit higher, but 5 is a good base.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it provides a wide variety. Like, they're all on theme, so somebody that is interested in this particular topic, which the most recent one was murders, will enjoy all of them. But it's also a wide enough variety that I feel like there's something for, well, not everybody, but for all of the tastes that are reflected in our writing style.
So, Dead Silence Tales, what was the theme there?
That was Dead Silence is the murder-themed one. This
Okay.
the one previous to that was Voices in the Darkness, which was supernatural themed. The murder-themed one, I guess it's many of them are mysteries. Some of them just have a bare hint of a mystery, but are horrific. But so the theme was murder, which of course speaks to mysteries to a lot of people.
Yeah, some people it's mysteries, other people it's just, adventure, excitement.
Yeah.
So
We are murdering people today, Ingenuity. We're murdering all of the characters in our stories. You have to kill your babies. That's what I always say.
oh my. How was the...
Have you not heard that phrase before?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, good. I was a little bit worried that everybody was going to think it.
No, I'm not, because I've actually come across that. It's an interesting reference to accepting the fact that your editor may not like everything you like, and there may be good reason for it.
It's true, but my biggest, she was wonderful and gentle with me, but I love repetition in my writing. I have no idea if I'll enjoy repetition as much when I read it, but when I read my own writing, I'm like, oh yeah, I repeated that word a lot. That's because it's an important word. She was like, yes, but you chose 5 different words to repeat a lot. You cannot die on all of these hills.
So, do you read your own writing out loud and figure out just how it sounds to you?
Interestingly, as an actor, I find that my out loud voice and my in my head voice are very similar. So I don't feel the need to read it out loud. And when I do, I don't find many changes that I haven't already done inside. And an additional problem to my out loud reading voice is that because I am so artsy fartsy and actory, is that when I read things out loud, I can mask what actually other people are going to hear when they read them. So, for example, when I read something to my wife that's in the newspaper or whatever, she has to tell me, I need you to not read it with a tone of voice, because if you do, then I won't get a sense of what they actually wrote, because I am, what's the word? Too expressive.
Isn't that the benefit of getting something read out loud, is getting the tone of voice?
It can be, except the tone of, so an actor, if I may be so bold as to suggest, an actor can take a very plainly written sentence and add so much underneath it that you get the subtext, even if a reader would never get the subtext from that. The actor can give it a subtext that doesn't belong to the text because they've decided that that's what's in the text, which I think is wonderful, and one of the reasons acting is an exciting profession for me. But it can be dangerous as a writer, because I read, for example, some of the notes where I don't understand what's happening. And to me, reading that out loud, I was like, this is very clear to me because I understand the subtext. And when I read out loud their words, I hear the tones and the subtext and all of that. But they're speaking, if I don't write it in the description of what people mean to be saying, then it's not obvious. Does that make sense?
Does to me. If anyone else doesn't have it make sense to them, they can speak up. I'm just
Shadows.
Pardon me?
I'm just reading the bot's name, which is a Shadows puppy, and I enjoy that.
There's a little bit of a joke behind that. As you can see, my screen name is Shadows Pub.
Yes.
And Rhonda Kay, who runs what was then the Writer's Block and is now Steamhouse, when we first met, she was leaving a comment on one of my posts, and of course, she runs a animal rescue, and she addressed me in her comment as Shadow's Pup. So it's become a bit of a joke with her calling me Shadow's Pup instead of Shadow's Pub.
Got it.
So I named the bot that.
Cute. Very cute.
Yeah. Most people, it's like me saying bye, Wilma, at the end of Pimp Your Post Thursday. There's only a few people that actually get it.
I like it.
No, you actually don't get it. You'd have to read the story behind it. So I'm looking at Voices in the Darkness up on Amazon, and the questions are rising. How's sales going, and how are you approaching marketing?
So sales, peaked in that first week afterwards. We had a couple dozen sales, and then petered out. We are a little bit hoping, or the plan as far as marketing goes is, since we're a Steam-based authors group, we are each individually mentioning the book as frequently as we can. And the idea, at least for the moment, is simply that we are going to be consistent. We're going to release a book every quarter. And as we build up our, as we release these books, we will be talking about all the books that have come before it, and we'll increase sales as people read the new book and then say, oh, I wonder what this group has written before. So that's currently the plan for marketing. We're not pushing like Steamhouse is to have a big release where we travel around the world. We are all trying to we know that this is an ambitious project and we're going to take it one step at a time. And the writing is the most important part to us. We acknowledge that the marketing and the publishing are giant endeavors that we have neither the time nor the funds to truly support. So we're going to write. We're going to hope our writing speaks for itself. We're to talk about the book as much as we can on the Steam blockchain and probably on Twitter as well. But we're not going to push ourselves to do more than we feel like we can sustain, because burnout is such a real thing.
Undertaking a author tour is a big deal, and there's a lot of authors are doing very successful without doing physical tours.
Yeah.
Are any of the group building email lists?
I have my own email list, which I use as an actor and have incorporated some of my writing into. I don't think we've collated. I know we haven't collated a Steam Fiction specific email list, but it's certainly something that we can talk about and adding each other's contacts to that.
Well, here's something you might find of interest. I've recently come across. This fellow here is building this, and currently it's free because he's still in the process of building it. But the idea is this story origin, forgotten his name now, is Colin, I think it is. He's building this app, and currently it's free to join, and I heard him in an interview say that the early adopters will probably remain free, even if he does decide to start charging. But the idea is that you can use this app for doing things like newsletter swaps and review copies and group giveaways.
No.
So it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
So that you might be interested in that.
I have clicked on the link and I will take a look at it when we're done talking.
Yeah, there's all kinds of little tools around. The trick is to come across them.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of marketing and so on and so forth, it ties back into kind of my trajectory with my acting career, which was just that I became burnt out on the other stuff that one can do, and had stopped focusing on my acting as I tried to do all of these other things. And taking a step away from that was really what helped me as an actor come back to my career. And so I'm still kind of taking that tack as far as the writing goes. Like, I love writing. I hate business. I'm willing to do a little bit of the business, but as soon as the business starts to dominate my brain, I need to take my step back and just focus on the writing.
It's interesting when I heard you make the comment that you didn't really like having to do something that was geared towards it directly or indirectly asking for money.
True. It's true.
I was listening in on a app of a internet marketer recently, or an app, a webinar, and she addressed that, and I was kind of impressed the way she did it, because she said, I know people don't like asking for money, they're queasy about it, but do you feel queasy when you have a job picking up your paycheck? That's asking for money. She's got a point.
To some extent, she has a point, but when you have an employer, the difference, at least with busking for me, is that when you have an employer, you've reached an agreement ahead of time, which I have no problem doing, is reach an agreement ahead of time with an employer. But when you are busking, you're on the street and you are just kind of putting your art out there. And some of the people don't want the art or didn't want the art enough to pay for it and are only interested in it if it's free, or maybe they're not even interested in it at all.
True.
And so asking those people that have not said, I want this thing, I will pay you for it, asking those people to give you money for the thing that you kind of presumptuously said, I think you want this thing, here it is I think a far sight different. And, I mean, the most successful buskers do it and are correct that the people want the thing. And I now perform at a Renaissance fair where the vast majority of the money we make is from tipping. And so that is still a beast where people have shown up to the performance. You did not just say, here's the performance. It's different.
The vast majority of sales in pretty well anything is not so much that the consumer needs it or wants it, but
Right.
You've influenced them to generate a desire.
Yeah. And I have never enjoyed that facet of capitalism. We have a lot of, I think, problems that come from marketing being good at manipulating human emotions.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you, but I also understand the necessity of it.
Absolutely. I mean, especially for artists. And, I acknowledge that so much of being a successful artist is not necessarily being good at your art, but rather being good at convincing people that you're good at your art. And, it's a problem for me.
We kind of see some of that here on the platform when you take a look at some posts that are up there, and they're writers that are not really getting a lot of traction, and yet their writing's perfectly acceptable. They do have a voice and they have something to say, but they're not being noticed.
Yep.
It's hard to make a living from something that you love, because after a while, the something that you love becomes work. And it's really hard to go out and say, well, this is what I deserve because it's wonderful art, but nobody wants to really pay.
Yeah, and even if they do agree that it's wonderful art, since you're willing to do it for free, it's hard to say, well, I'm not going to do this thing for you if you don't pay me. That's an almost impossible problem. And it's especially, just to relate it back to acting in Los Angeles, there's so much competition amongst actors just because there's a lot of us that love to do it, that are very good at it, that the producers can kind of take their pick of who will do it for cheapest, because there are a lot of us that are good enough to get paid to do it.
So did the screen name Improv come from the fact that you do improv, or you just picked it out of the air?
Essentially, it came from the fact that I do improv. My introduction to Steam was a fella, Jacob TS, who has been around the blockchain a little bit longer than me, and and he was a Facebook friend of mine, and he had said, "Hey, I don't understand why Steam isn't full of improvisers, since we're already a supportive community of creative artists. We should all be on there." And I thought, oh, well, that's great. And he was like, "I'm going to start the improv trail," and I didn't know what anything meant at that point, and I joined and thought, well, I'm here because I do improv, because an improv friend told me to join, so I will join. And then that was my name, and now that I've branched out into other things, well, that's just my name.
He was doing a lot of promoting improv on the platform for a while.
Yeah.
He hasn't been around much, though, has he?
It's true. I think there's a lot of people on Steam who are, they're hustling. They're hustling, and not, I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that they're trying to make a lot of things work in their lives. And he's still on Steam, but he's moved back to LA, in fact. But he's got a lot of things going on, and so he's stopping by here and stopping by there and trying to make a career for himself everywhere. And I feel like the thing to transition maybe a little bit to talking about Free Write House, the thing that has kept me consistently on Steam, unlike some other people that are hustling in the same way, is Free Write House, is the fact that every day I have a habit of writing. I have a habit of doing a 5-minute free write every day. And if I didn't have that habit, I can imagine going for weeks at a time without checking it. But because I'm doing that every day, I'm on Steam for a little bit and then start interacting with people, and then I'm on Steam for hours.
So did you move from doing improv on Steam to moving to the Free Write House, or was there something in between?
Well, actually, so I started, my first post was just something about trying to get a role-playing game, because it seemed like a great platform for just playing a by-text role-playing game. But my second day on Steam, I started doing a free write. And like my 20th day on Steam, Marianne West said, "Hey, I see that you're doing free writes. Do you want to do them as like a thing where we get other people to do them?" And I said, "I'm happy for you to do that, and I will join you. But again, I hate doing the business side of things." And she said, "Okay." And so she started and should have all the credit for making Free Write House what it is today. But I've been free writing on Steam every single day since before Free Write House began. And I feel like free writing is a little bit like improvisation. I mean, not a little bit like, it's very much like improvisation, except you're not doing it with your body, you're just doing it with your brain and your hands.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because that's the question I was trying to formulate in my mind was, isn't improv kind of like doing free write acting?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And I feel like there's a lot of value going back and forth between doing improvisation and doing free writes and getting your brain to work that way.
So you had started doing free writes on your own, and then Marianne, who was doing them anyways, I think she did them pretty well from when she came onto the platform.
Yeah.
Noticed you were doing it.
Yeah, exactly. She and I met very soon after she joined the platform, and I had only been on the platform for like a month at that point as well. I don't remember what days anything was, but it feels like that's true. So we've been doing them together for almost the entire time that we've been on Steam together.
Initially, when free write first started getting noticed on the platform, it had a little bit of pushback from some people, and some of that was because people were just literally doing their brain dumps. And,
I still do my brain dumps.
Well, they were posting their brain dumps. Let me say.
I still post my brain dumps. It's interesting. It sounds like maybe you are on the side of this divide.
No. You let me complete the thought.
Go on.
And then over time, I noticed that it moved from the disjointed brain dumps that I saw in some of the early ones to what looked like some fairly polished pieces, which kind of told me that people were kind of maybe taking what they had brain dumped and organizing it a little bit before they actually posted it.
So I still think that you're on the other side of this issue. So I think that
I don't think there's sides.
Okay. All right. Sorry. I didn't mean to make this seem like an argument.
Yeah.
But yes, we had a lot of pushback at the beginning. But there are still brain dumps. I want to be very clear about that. I will post a link to my most recent ridiculous brain dump. In fact, I think it's my most recent. Yeah, there you go.
I looked at that brain dump, and I actually asked Shadows, is this really just a 5-minute free write? Because it seems much more polished, so this must be a really good writer.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for thinking that my brain dumps are good. But they are absolutely just brain dumps. I'm just doing 5-minute free writes. And I think that there are some people, and I want to be clear to everybody that's doing free writes that I think that that is perfectly acceptable, and I don't think that it is junk on the blockchain. Oh, Glass Bottle is just a free write, but this is the one that I was talking about. Nobody thinks that this is good content.
Let me see.
And so I think that the blockchain is not really about blogging the greatest blogs in the world. I think that Steam, that's great, and that those things will hopefully, if we have better curation, reach trending instead of whatever people are paying bid bots for. But I think that it is also acceptable that people post whatever they want and let those things, not ever get any upvotes, but let communities interact with each other. And that's what Free Write House to me is about. It's about people saying, hey, you know what? You don't have to be good at writing. You just have to write every day and post it, and we will enjoy it because we enjoy each other's brain dumps and we just enjoy getting to know each other. You don't need to worry about whether or not it's good enough for the blockchain. So that is something that is my pushback against anybody that's saying don't put junk on the blockchain. Like, there are things that I don't want to see on the blockchain. I don't want to see spam, and I don't want to see reposts of other things that are elsewhere on the internet. But I do want to see people's just original writing, even if it's not good. I heard an
There's two sides to that, okay?
Sure.
One is what you've just articulated, and the other aspect of it is that if we want to see this platform move forward, then people need to be able to find a lot of good content, and I don't mean good content in the sense that somebody's written, some wonderful essays, and those are great, but some, readable, reasonably well presented posts that they find and can enjoy. That's what they need to be able to find when it gets stirred up in the search engines. So there's two sides to the argument. I'm going to call it an argument, but it's not going to
Sure.
be an argument.
We can. I mean, I don't mind the word argument. I feel like arguments are how we figure out what we think.
Well, there is another way to look at it too. I mean, you say that this free write, you know, isn't one of your greatest, but it's not a bad post because it's not the only thing in your post. You've written
Actually,
something else.
I was actually just laughing when I looked at this because I read this earlier, okay? And
Uh-huh.
I saw probably down to now onto the free write, and then I scanned without really paying a whole lot of attention because I was moving on to other stuff. And it's only when Artemis gave us the link again and I went back and looked at it that I noticed all of your typos that are in there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like in a post that I put up yesterday, I talked about the fact that the mind can go by so many mistakes when we're proofreading. They can go by
Sure.
it when we're reading too.
Sure. Yeah. And two, like, so I say that this is not my best quality, and I think that we can all agree on that. But let's also point out that, like, it still has value. Like, we can enjoy it, and I don't think that that it's so subjective what is good and what is not good. But back to your point about finding good content, I think that is not a problem with what goes on the blockchain. I don't think it's a problem with there's just too much on the blockchain. It has to do with the fact that we don't have well-developed search engines. We don't have a reasonable trending page. It doesn't have to do with, like, if you just look at new, yeah, there's thousands of posts that are mostly not good, but that's true on any platform. People, not that I love Reddit, but people love Reddit, and most of the stuff that's on there is junk. But they have a good system, or they have a reasonable system to push some things up that people actually want to look at. And so I don't think that it is a problem with what gets posted, and I don't think that it is a problem with, making a couple bucks on your posts because your community supports you. I think it's a problem both with, being able to buy votes that are worth hundreds of dollars, and a problem with there being no reasonable way to discover the content that you want to find.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that search engine aspect of it. Not to mention the fact that I am not a fan of Reddit. People say to
Sure.
me, there is so much wonderful information on there, and I look at it and go, where? Because
Right.
most of it is crap, from what
Sure.
I see. But hey,
Sure. But I mean, take anything that you enjoy. I don't think that Steam should be Medium or whatever blogging site. Personally, this is my personal opinion after having been on Steam for a long time, and what I love about Steam and what I feel like I see gets people to stay engaged on Steam is not Steam as a blogging site, though I think that there's certainly a place for blogging, for people writing posts that will interest people the way a post on Medium or whatever would, but rather as a social media site, which is also what it gets billed at. And if I look at my social media feed, it's filled with my friends doing the things or talking about the things that my friends want to talk about. And I'm interested in what they have to think because they're my friends. And
see,
I think that is what I want Steam to be.
I tend to think that
for me.
until we get to the point that we've got a little wall up there that we can throw up our Twitter-like comments and our longer stuff and a little bit of everything, similar to what we see over on Facebook, we really haven't got social media here. We have content creation. We have some games. Go ahead.
I mean, I think, for me, it's social media. It depends on how one curates one's own feed. For me, it's social media. For me, I interact with the people that I've built friendships with, and I very rarely read content, for the most part, because the content I see that's content is just about what is happening in the cryptocurrency world, and I don't really care that much about that.
Yeah,
and I know that there are other things, but I don't really go to that. I go to what's my friend posted about. Oh, they've posted this, this short fiction, or oh, they're dealing with a health problem, or oh, So to me, it's still it's social media, and I think that has everything to do with how I interact with Steam, and I think one can if one chooses.
So one of the other
who said that? What was that?
One of the other problems that I see with the platform is that there is an inordinate amount of time talking about the platform. that's probably great
Yeah.
for people that are really into Steam, but if we want to invite the outside world in, spending a whole lot of time talking about the platform is not going to invite them.
So I agree with you there, and I think that, but I also think that there are the places. So for me, again, Free Write House is where I spend most of my time, and I feel like I can be fairly successful at. I mean, as successful as anybody is to get their friends onto something that their friends think is strange and out of the world. But to talk about, oh yeah, I've got a bunch of friends on Steam who all do these free writes. We don't talk for the most part about Steam itself. We talk about free writing and or we enjoy each other's free writes and or we interact in a social way. And I think that ultimately is the key to getting lots of people on Steam. My mother, for example, we created her an account, but she doesn't really go on Steam because she's like, but all my friends are on Facebook. So I want to see the things that friends are posting because they're on Facebook. So we have to get to me, the step to on the way to mass adoption is some critical mass of one's friends. If you have 5 friends on Steam, then you're going to log on to Steam and want your other friends to be on.
I think
There's a
I've
lot
got
of
to-
there's a lot of truth to that. One of the things that, as you've rightly said about Free Write House, is that Free Write House has encouraged some people to start writing and actually build on that writing, or in some cases, I can think of at least 1 or 2 where they've gone off and created some videos or other types of content. And it's helped to give them a little bit of confidence, and that in itself is not a bad thing.
Yeah, and I think that confidence is important, but I think that the first step to confidence is knowing that people are going to love you no matter what, love the things that you're making, love the things that you're doing, rather than worrying about telling you that you're doing them wrong. And I'm not saying that anybody's doing that, but it is the thing when there was pushback in the early part of Free Write House, and we were like, we're just going to keep doing this because for us, or at least for me, it's not about the quality of someone's free write. It's not about whether or not they're a good writer. For many of them, English is not their first language. It's simply about, hey, I'm interacting with you and I'm getting to know you by virtue of whether you're writing fiction or whether you're saying blah, 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 blah. That's the thing that I always encourage people to do. If they don't feel like they're good writers, it's fine if your free write is you writing blah, 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 blah for 5 minutes. You're not going to wind up doing that because your brain can't handle repeating blah, blah, blah for 5 minutes. But
there was
you're
some
welcome.
of that. There was some of that pushback that I heard that I really thought was kind of brutal and somewhat elitist.
It felt bad. We all
I'm
felt
sure it
bad
did.
for a little bit, and then we said what we're doing is fine. We can use the Steam blockchain the way we think it should be used, and I hope it's a place for everyone.
So Hiva's got a question here. He's got a long-term question. Do you think in 10 years, when Steam is no longer mined, you will move the community to a subtoken in order to still provide a reward system? Steam isn't mined now, except through our content creation.
It's a confusing question because in 10 years, there will always be a reward pool. It's going to go down to 1%, I think, in the long term, a 1% inflation rate, but there's no plan for it to ever cease to exist. If we're going to move Free Write House to a sub-token, I don't know. There hasn't been a ton of discussion about that. It still seems like SMTs are a long ways away. It's been getting talked about for years at this point. And everybody talks about kind of how difficult it is. I think that and I know Steam Engine has a thing. I don't think any of us is so dedicated to the idea of sub-tokens that we're jumping on the Steam Engine train or just the Steam Engine. But, if that becomes the standard, then I'm sure we'll move forward with something else that's standard, especially if it becomes easy to do, where we don't need to have a ton of technical know-how.
It's an interesting possibility, and it's something that's developing. So it's kind of something that we kind of look at and go, what are the possibilities, and what can we do with it? I've created a token am I going to set up a website? Maybe at some point we might do a front end, but at this point it's being used for people that are sharing and engaging on the platform. In fact, the Free Write House has enough of those tokens that they can actually be dropping them on people's posts.
Oh.
I
Cool.
They participated in the our Steam show last Wednesday that was over in the inner blocks, and I gave 100 shade to each of the communities that participated. So
Nice.
when you're on a
I'm dropping
post,
shade on people.
when you're using that particular account, you can do up to that amount. So you do / shade, and you can go anywhere from 1 to 5, and
Great.
they'll be sent to them, distributed to them.
Great. Yeah, there. More than a year ago, a fellow named Biophil created a token called Pocket, which also uses the Steam blockchain.
I have a couple million.
Yeah, yep. So do I. And so I use Pocket. I don't know if you're interested in puns, but you probably know by now that I run Pun Day Monday every week. And
No,
on
I
Friday,
didn't. Tell us about that.
Yeah. No, you don't. Pun Day Monday is something that I also started very early in my time on the blockchain. We're on Pun Day Monday number 102. So I've been doing it for just under 2 years as well. There's the most recent one from yesterday. And every Friday, so you log on, you click on that link, and I have a how-to if you don't know what puns are or how to make them. I drop a topic every week, and I have a pretty consistent followership of Pun Day Monday of about a dozen people who make puns on the topic, because I'm an actor and an improviser and a comedian. And I also open on Fridays, then the audience can vote on their favorite puns. And they vote on the puns by giving Pocket to other punsters that they think made the best pun over the course of the week. And if you don't have any Pocket, you can request some, and someone will send you some Pocket to vote with. And so that's on Pocket Friday. And then every Monday I choose my favorite pun, the audience favorite pun, and whichever pun was the best from a rookie. And I reward them with Steam Basic Income.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to suggest that you join us on Pimp Your Post Thursday on Thursdays and promote these posts.
Thursdays. What? Drop me a link and I will click it.
Right in here. Pimp Your Post Thursday is the longest running show that's run here in the Ramble, and it's on at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, so that would be 8 for you. And then again in the evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight, which would be 4 for you.
Where do I find it? I'm somewhere in the Ramble. So I'm in the Ramble.
You're in the Curation Corner?
Excuse me.
I'm
PYPT would be the channel that it'll be in.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Thursday. Got it. Pimp Your Post Thursday.
Pimp
Got
Your
it.
Post Thursday. I think
I
it's
understand.
about the longest running post promotion show on the chain. It's
On
been running
the-
almost 2 years.
From Discord. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I consider it on the chain. It's about the chain.
Sure.
So what other little projects do you have? You've got Pun Day Monday, and you've got Steve's
sure.
Fiction, and you've got Free Write House.
Free
What
Write
else are
House.
you into?
Well, not on the Steam blockchain, but I am a part of a company that has produced 3 short films that are all based on comics from the 1930s and 1940s that have fallen into the public domain that feature female heroine. So my wife wrote one called Ghost Woman. We also have one called The Lady in Red, The Woman in Red, and The Veiled Avenger. We've shot those, and right now we're working on raising post-production funds in order to finish them and submit them to film festivals and put them out into the universe.
Interesting.
Yeah. I got to play a werewolf finally in Ghost Woman. other things that I do. I have written a web series called Gentle Werewolf, some of which I have posted on the blockchain. The web series itself is not made. I just have the script for it. And we're always looking for supporters. If you know anybody with a couple tens of thousands of dollars that they want to spend to produce a major piece of cinematic future history, send them my way. What other things do I do with my life? I perform at Comedy Sports, which is all across the nation actually, but I perform in Los Angeles. Comedy Sports is competitive team improv. There's a blue team and a red team, and they compete for laughter and points. There's a referee. There's all the trappings of a sporting event, but comedy.
So you certainly keep active within the craft.
I do. I perform. I perform on camera as well. Last year, I had the privilege of playing Macbeth in Macbeth. I do what I can to make a career out of the skills that I have.
I'll share a little story with you when you mentioned Woman in Red.
Yeah.
Many years ago, the church that I went to, which is now closed, the priest and a couple of the members of the parish were putting on a talent night in the sanctuary. And the next board meeting after the talent night, one of the older members of the congregation sat there and looked at the priest and says to her, some of the members of the congregation are not happy at that kind of entertainment in the sanctuary. And without batting an eyelash, the priest looked at her and said, "Oh, so I guess you're not going to like us doing Women in Red next." It did not go over well.
Wow.
That came immediately to mind when you mentioned that.
That's great. That's a good story.
It was cute. It was all I did. I burst out laughing, and it made the parishioner even madder.
Yeah. So I try to keep my hand into a lot of pots. Right now, I've recently become a member of the voiceover lab at SAG-AFTRA. So I'm a union actor, and they have some resources to help voice actors advance their careers. So I've done that as well, and that is a thing that is worth mentioning. I don't know if anybody out there has need of a voice actor, but I am for hire and will accept payment in Steam. So just keep that in your bonnet.
So describe what a voice actor does.
A voice actor is anybody that you in a motion picture of any sort or radio. If you hear a voice but don't see a face speaking that voice, so that includes animation. It includes the people that talk over commercials. It includes narration in something. There's also e-learning. E-learning is something I'm interested in. Audiobooks, people that read audiobooks are voice actors as well. So all of those things, if you have need, especially e-learning might be useful for the Steam blockchain. They're like, oh, I've written this great tutorial on how to do things, but I'm not a voice actor. And I'd like somebody with a professional voice and with the editing equipment necessary to make it flow smoothly. Hire me, and I can put that together for you.
So do you do a podcast or anything like that?
I've been guests on many podcasts, but I don't host my own podcast at all, no.
Is it something you've considered?
The closest that I've come to it, or that I am coming to it, is in several months we're going to shoot Brendan Teaches Games, or I don't know, we don't have a solid name for it yet, with a friend who has, or an acquaintance who has hired me, who has a YouTube channel dedicated to pop culture to some extent. And since I'm a big gamer as well, I will be teaching people how to play games. But that will be, you'll be seeing me. It's not just a podcast. It is
it's like a video
series. Yeah, a web series.
Well,
thank you, the kitty girl. I'm glad you like my voice.
Yeah, I have to agree with her on that. You have a very radio perfect voice.
Thank you. That's a wonderful compliment.
So, just in passing sort of thing, I have done a bit of a podcast. I've fallen behind on it, and I need to get it caught back up again. But what I do on that podcast is when I write a essay type post, it then becomes a podcast. And I was actually rather surprised at how much exposure it was getting when it got distributed to the various platforms.
Well, yeah.
It might be something to consider for with some of the free rights.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny that your idea dovetails nicely with one of the ideas that Pensie's had. I believe he recommended that we do some of our free rights on Vim as well. So maybe live streaming them on Vim and then putting them in a podcast. Do you have a little how-to on distributing podcasts? Because I would probably just Google it.
Anchor.com.
Anchored.com? ANCHORED.com?
Anchor.com.
Oh, she's writing. You'll write it. Oh, great.
Yeah. And they will distribute them to, I think it's about 10 platforms. It doesn't cost.
That's great.
So it was kind of cool watching that happen.
You asked me about podcasts, and it occurs to me, it's not my podcast, but a friend of mine, everybody's a friend of mine. I mean, I like her. She's a friend of mine. But she has what is it even called? She has a wonderful podcast in which that she solicits short stories for. And I've had a couple of short stories on her podcast, doing my own voice acting. I will look for that, and I will see if I can find.
Now, you being based in the U.S., one of the benefits you'll have with Anchor.com is you actually can get people subscribing and earning off of it. They haven't made that available in Canada yet.
That's wonderful.
So there's possibilities there. So Artemis, do you have anything you'd like to talk to Improv about?
Well, just some nosy things. You've answered most of my questions, but I still am curious to how you went from Germany and decided to go back to LA.
So from Germany, while we were in Germany, we had always decided that we were only going to stay in Germany for a year. And we did get a little bit sorely tempted towards the end of our time because we both had decent paying jobs while we were there. And we, were falling in love with the city that we were in, and we made a lot of good friends there. But ultimately, we had decided that we were going to come back to the U.S. at the very least, because we had already made plans to get married on my parents' farm and go from there. So we weren't going to get married overseas so that everybody would have to come to us. That would be cruel. So while we were in Magdeburg, Germany, where we were living, we reviewed all of our city options. New York seemed like the obvious option for me because I'd always been an actor in the theater and I loved the theater. And obviously New York is kind of the city to be in for the theater. But when we had been in New York, and it's wonderful for many people, it just didn't feel right to us. We'd spent a couple of weeks in New York. It was very expensive. And it also just didn't feel like our city. It didn't feel like it felt a little bit too hustle and bustle. Oh, the dog is barking. Just a second. Let me stop the dog from barking. I'll be right back. Go. Be loud elsewhere. All right, I've returned.
I had a cat that used to inject herself into the show.
Yes. So New York just didn't feel right as much as I still love the idea of, it's so romantic. And I have friends who do it, who show up at the Equity auditions and wait for hours to see if they can get that one slot that is set aside, and so on and so forth. It also just didn't feel like the city as a whole was the right fit for us. New Orleans, in retrospect, probably would have been a better fit for us. But it was 10 years ago too. So the film industry, though it has kind of moved out to the south, was still very much in Los Angeles at that time. And it felt like the other two options were Chicago, and Chicago was just too cold while we were there. I'm used to the cold, but it was just so bitterly cold while we were there. We just didn't want to consider living in Chicago all the time. And then Los Angeles. Los Angeles.
You didn't want to move to Canada either, right?
Oh, no. We didn't consider Canada because we're not citizens, and that felt like a whole nother rigmarole to get work permits for a different country. But had we might have moved to Vancouver. That's possible. There were a couple of shows shooting in Vancouver at the time. But Los Angeles did feel right. It felt like it was inexpensive. I mean, it's not inexpensive because it's a big city, but it was inexpensive relative to other big cities, and or at least relative to New York City. And it felt like one could live fairly inexpensively here in Los Angeles, and we found that to be correct. We enjoyed the challenge of it being a car culture city where we were determined not to own a car, and we've managed to do that, and so we feel proud of ourselves for doing that. And also, like, the idea of being in the film and television capital of the world has its romance as well. So we are, neither of us has found explosive success, but we've both carved out a niche and built a community for ourselves. And, people talk about how hard it is in LA, and I get it. There's a lot of people that leave LA because of that, but we've really fallen in love with the city.
Well, there's a lot of people leave the platform because they can't get themselves a comfort niche. So
that's
it's
true
relevant.
too. That's true too. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like success to me. It sounds like you're happy.
Yes, thank you. And we are. We have a 19-month-old son, and that has brought us a lot of, joy, obviously, but a lot of kind of perspective on what it is that we want and how unimportant ultimately the struggle to have a successful career can be if you want it to be less important. It's still important to us, but it's not nearly as much of a means by which we judge whether or not we are successful.
I think a lot of that depends on how you define it.
Yeah.
If you're making a living and your family's reasonably comfortable and its needs are met, and you've got satisfaction in what you're doing, how much more do you want?
It's true. It's true. I mean, I want a lot more, but I'm willing to accept not a lot more.
I hear you on that one.
Yeah, our big financial dream is to own a house. We have a very affordable apartment right now, and we know how grateful we need to be for the lives that we live. We see the difficulties that other people experience that haven't hit us quite so hard, but we want a backyard. We tremendously want a backyard here. So fingers crossed that Steam goes to $10 and Bitcoin goes to $1 million in the near future.
I think we all agree on that one.
Yeah.
So, Artemis, anything else you wanted to cover?
No, and thanks for filling in the rest of the story, Improv.
Yeah, my pleasure. This is a very lovely channel you guys have here.
Yeah, we try to keep it semi-casual, but, kind of organized. So we've run a little bit over, which I didn't mind. But when we're having a great conversation, I always enjoy running a little bit over. In about 40 minutes, the Freedoms will be here with their Inner Block show, so don't go too far away, everyone. I see Kitty Girl is typing something there. So, she's still there.
It's a paragraph.
There we are. Thank you for spending time with us today. That was an interesting show, and many more listening to the recording than is here. That's true. There are quite a few that listen to the recording. So I will give you my thanks for you being here today. And Artemis, it's all yours.
Thanks for joining us, Improv. I really